Hi, this is Jim Cunningham. Today, we're going to talk about not outliving your money. So we have Shannon Behan from Ascent Wealth Management and Brad Sykoff. We're going to talk about this strange feeling that people have, or this strange fear that people have, especially in a market downturn. Am I going to outlive my money? And as we were talking about this before we got started, it doesn't matter how much money you have. A lot of people are worried, is it going to last? Am I going to live longer than my money will be around? So this is very important. This is not, no one's selling anyone anything. Okay. This is not legal advice. This is not financial advice. We are going to go through a strategy to bridge that income gap between the amount of money that you have, essentially your retirement savings, and your income, like Social Security. And what if those don't quite add up? Or what if there's a little bit of fear there? If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube page. And if you're watching this live, you can click the Q&A button and post your question there. You can also post comments and questions in the Q&A button. I would encourage you to do that as well. I'm an attorney. I'm Jim Cunningham, 25 years plus experience. We have offices throughout California. I'm a certified specialist in estate planning, trust, and probate law, a real estate broker, and securities and insurance licensed. And I will say that most of our clients want to pay the least taxes possible while securing a legacy for themselves and their loved ones. We're here to help craft a plan, give you some options, make some recommendations that are part of an integrated plan to reduce your overall tax bill, leading to more wealth for yourself, your family, and your loved ones. Shannon is an integral part of Ascent Wealth Management. We work closely with Ascent Wealth Management and they're frequent flyers here. So here's the big issue. And this is one, again, it doesn't matter how much money you have, but will you outlive your money? You've worked hard to save, right? You've worked hard you either earned it yourself, you might have inherited it, and it is hard to save it and to protect it. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you earned it or you inherited it. And the big question is on everyone's mind when they retire, how long will my savings last? Now that's if I'm drawing down regular withdrawals. So I've saved up money, and there are several variables. One is, what's your Social Security benefit, right? How much do you have in savings? How much is in your qualified plan? How much is are your income taxes? I was meeting with a client this morning. He says, I'm going to turn 72. Next year, my minimum distributions are going to be $150,000 a year. Well, those minimum distributions get added. They get added to your income. It's a forced distribution from your retirement account, as you know. And so that does diminish your overall wealth. So we do have, let's see, one. Okay, great. Anita, thank you. So again, this is information only, and what we're going to be talking about primarily is an annuity, which is an insurance product that is designed, it is purpose-built to bridge that income gap. And I'll tell you, no one's here to sell anybody anything. We're just talking about what tools there are out there in the universe or in the United States for people who want to bridge that income gap. So I'll turn it over to you, Brad and Shannon, and you can educate us on how to bridge that income gap.
Thanks, Jim. So again, Shannon Behan, I'm a certified financial planner with Ascent Wealth Management. And as Jim said, this is a topic of conversation that we are having with clients every single day. Nobody is immune to this concern. These are the questions that we're receiving. How do I have enough saved? Am I going to be okay? What about my spouse? There's a lot of compounding concerns here. And so really what we hope to do today with this conversation is just kind of give you some insight into what are some of the concerns that you do face in making that money last as long as you do, and how are some of the ways that we can tackle that. As Jim mentioned, this is not a one size fits all solution. Annuities are perfect for the right person, but they're not perfect for everybody. I always like to use the analogy of medicine, right? If you need medicine, you want to take it and it's good for you. But if you don't need it, no reason to take it. So with that in mind, we'll just kind of jump into, this topic today and kind of how this conversation will go. And again, Jim will let us know as questions pop up, but really the starting point of this conversation is looking at, what do you want for your retirement? And we've got a lot of fears about how do we get there, but that starting point is defining what it looks like. What are some of the challenges that we'll face in getting there? How do we turn that savings that we've worked so hard for into an income stream? Once we know that we need to do that, how do we begin, right? That's always the hardest part. And then finally, some ideas on how to generate that income. So I'll turn it over to Brad here in a second, but I just kind of want to set that foundational aspect, right? So the where we start, that kind of what is the vision for my retirement, is we need to consider what we want retirement to look like. Where do we want to live? What do we want to be doing? What hobbies do we have? Is there travel that we want to partake in? Are the grandkids across the country? Do we plan on working part-time? Do we want to volunteer? All of those are questions that need to be answered. And we oftentimes plan for retirement as if it is one moment in time, that there's a set day, that this is my retirement and that's it. But it's really a process. And there's a lot of decisions that go into this. There's a lot of variables. So you need that retirement income plan, which we'll talk a lot about today. You also need a retirement tax plan as well. Jim mentioned required minimum distributions. How will that impact you? How will your retirement income be taxed? There's a lot of different ways that a good financial advisor can help you be strategic about that. One of the things that we deal with quite often with clients these days, being here in California, is that consideration of, do we want to leave the state? This tax environment here is a little rough. Do we want to go somewhere else? Maybe lower income taxes, property taxes, cost of living. Another thing to consider when we look at states is there a state level estate tax or a state level inheritance tax? So there's a ton of variables. And the reason that this visualizing retirement piece is so important is because we need to know where we're going in order to have a plan to get there.
Shannon, it's interesting you mentioned all these different variables, because I think people mistakenly think that retirement is solely about money. Mm-hmm. It's really also about what you want to do with the remaining 40 years of your life, maybe 20. Who knows? Who knows how long it's going to be? And I'm reminded, one of the homes that my wife and I sold several years ago, it was a large family home. We raised our children there, and then we sold it to a couple who was recently retired. And I thought to myself, why would somebody be buying a house with 5 bedrooms? They're retired. They're buying a house with 5 bedrooms. You know what they said? They said, we made the mistake of downsizing when we retired. Then our kids had grandkids, and we want to have a place for the grandkids to stay.
They're the holiday destination.
That is another element of retirement, is housing. And, you may not want to be around your grandkids. I don't know. Maybe you don't like them, but most people do love their grandkids and want to be around them. So.
Yeah, Jim, I always say that money in and of itself is not a goal. It's a tool. It just helps you get where you want to go. And I think that's really good to keep in mind. So, once we've got that idea of where we want to go, what we want retirement to look like, obviously there's going to be some challenges on the way to getting there. So from your perspective, Brad, what are you seeing as some of the biggest challenges that people are facing?
Well, Jim and Shannon, you've teed this up just perfectly. And this is a great conversation. And one that's very timely. I don't think we could have timed this conversation any better, because when you think about the current environment, we're just a hair below the all-time high in the stock market. We are at historically low interest rates. And so when you think about the current environment, and then you compound that with 29 trillion in debt, national debt, there's some anxiety out there, and for good reason. And so this is a conversation that we should all be having, but really to hone in on your own individual confidence level of what that plan looks like. And for all of us, we've just gone through 2 years of maybe, rethinking what that plan looks like, that picture of retirement, maybe resetting retirement. Maybe you have a new perspective. And so, yes, there's anxiety out there, but there are also tools that are available to maybe lower that pressure a little bit, give you a little bit of peace of mind that you should have, because all that vision of retirement is what you should be focused on, not all the intricacies that we deal with on a daily basis. But the challenge really isn't the stock market, interest rates, or the debt. The challenge that we're all going to be faced with is that 3-legged stool of retirement, personal savings, Social Security, and pensions is broken. And just in the last 20 plus years, people that had pensions with corporate America slowly shifted to 401ks. And when you think about it, we all want that pension plan. People that have pension plans, it's factual, live longer, happier lives. They have a guaranteed check. It's going to last as long as they live. And so we're all asking ourselves, are we going to outlive our money? Is our money going to outlive us? I don't know. And if there's any degree of doubt, that could be a concern. So what we're all kind of thinking about is, how do I turn that one check when I retire? I get a lump sum for my 401k. How do I in turn convert that to a lifetime check? And how do I create my own personal pension plan? So that's what this conversation's about. And I do this on a daily basis. And you guys mentioned that you're getting questions about this all the time. And it doesn't matter how much money you have. The happiest people on the planet don't have the most amount of assets. The happiest people have the most amount of income. And so really that's what this conversation is about. So if you want to click to the next slide, there's a lot of things, and that additional anxiety is caused by the things we can't control. We can't control inflation. We can't control healthcare costs. We can't control how long we're going to live. In fact, there's a 50% chance if you're a couple age 65 today, one or the other is going to make it to age 93. And in our business, failure is not an option. You have to make sure that check lasts as long as you live, and flip a coin. One or the other spouse is going to make it to age 95. You just have to plan on it. So next slide, please. So we talk about all the things we can't control, but what is it that we can control when it comes to retirement income? We can control the pace in which we take our money out. So a lot of people say, well, the market does about 10% a year. So can I take about 10% and I should never run out of money? I shouldn't even impact my principal. Well, in fact, we have tons and tons of data, tons and tons of simulations that run through the sequence in which you experience those returns. We know the market is one of extremes. Yes, it might average 10%, but you don't get 10% every single year. It might be up 20, down 15, and so on. So the data composed by T. Rowe Price says if you have a 35-year retirement and you're taking a 4% withdrawal rate, this is adjusted for inflation, there's an 81% chance of success that your money's going to last. What do you mean an 81% chance of success? What do you mean by that, Brad? So if you have a 60-40 portfolio, that's 60% equity, 40% bond, and I'm taking a 4% withdrawal, then that's an 81% chance that I have at least $1 in my account the time I made it 35 years. But there's a 19% chance that you'll die penniless, basically. That's right. That's right. And how about the other 5%?
Thing I would chime in here about is that the 60-40 portfolio of old days is not the 60-40 portfolio that we have today, right? That 60% has always been a little bit more risk on stocks, equities. The 40% traditionally been more bonds, fixed income, that safer asset class. We just can't rely on that safer portion, those bonds, to produce the income and the return that we used to be able to. So we need to be more tactical and smart about how we're investing that 40% of the portfolio as well.
Absolutely. We have a question, just a question that's totally tied to this. Anita asks, will you touch on the issue if one has a stock portfolio, IRAs, and an annuity? Where is the best place to consider beginning to draw? What's the order of liquidation? That's a great question.
Yeah. So typically the way that, your textbook answer to that question would be to take money from your deferred or your non-qualified assets first. So that's money that's already been taxed, that you're paying the taxes on as it grows, because there's no consequences for utilizing that money for your income. The second would be your tax deferred assets. So your IRAs, if you have an annuity as well, that would be considered tax deferred. And your last would be that tax-free asset, or your Roth IRA, if you have that. Now, with that being said, that's the textbook answer. It doesn't make sense for everyone. Everyone is going to have a different situation. Maybe there's a time between when you retire and before you turn 72, when you have to start taking those required minimum distributions, that there might be a gap in your income where we're able to accelerate some of your qualified income that you're going to have to pay taxes on anyway. So the short answer to that is it depends.
Well, Brad, I have a question, kind of a high level question. A person who's retiring and they say, this money has to last 35 years. They retire on Friday. On the following Monday, they meet with Shannon I personally would be really worried of a big drawdown in the stock market. Now, what a drawdown means is stocks go down. That is bad. A drawdown is not good. A drawdown is a bad thing. And the reason I'm worried about that is because I saw it in 2008 when I was in practice, and I met with so many clients who had just retired. They were invested in a way where they lost, out of the gate, a whole bunch of money, and unfortunately panicked and then sold everything. So there's this human component that goes with ups and downs, and we're far more inclined to sell our winners, to sell the stocks that are going up, than to sell our losers, and that's a real problem. I mean, that's maybe just the human element. So there's not really a question in there. It's more of a comment, I guess.
Yeah, no, and it tees up the next two slides because we don't know. We think about, we get prepared and we save, we do everything we're supposed to do. And unfortunately, there's a little bit of luck tied to this as well. And the luck factor is exactly what you said, Jim. What about I just retired at the wrong time and I have a bad sequence of returns? Well, this is David, and he retired in a good market. And really, they call it the fragile first decade. What happens at the beginning will set the tone for the rest of your retirement. So David here, he retired in 1994. In the 90s, markets were great. You remember the days you can get into a taxi cab? Back then we had taxi cabs, and they would have a stock tip for you, and you would actually say, I think they're onto something. Well, everything was working. The markets were great. In this case, David had a great first few years, and he was taking his 5% withdrawals, but by 2014, he still had over $1 million net of all the withdrawals. So that was a good scenario. So the next is Monica. And Monica, she wasn't so lucky. This is to your point, Jim. Fragile first decade, the first few years dictate everything. So same 5% withdrawal, she had 95,000 left over at the end. So timing is everything. And like I said, luck does play a factor in these plans as well.
And I think people think about the Warren Buffett comment that was taken completely out of context, which is you don't need a financial advisor because just put it in the S&P 500 and you'll be fine. That keeps, when it's going up, it's great. When it goes down, clients, here's what happens. They panic and they sell. So, I mean, I suppose there's an element of truth in there, but you're also on 5 stocks basically, right? On or like the NASDAQ, you've got 5 stocks or the S&P, whichever one has those big 5 stocks in it.
Right.
You know, that's it. I mean, it's stressful because I talk to the clients when they say, I don't know what to do. I'm stressed out. I've lost money. What do I do? So,
yeah. And we always hear this time it's different. And diversification used to be stocks, bonds, and real estate. And then back then, during that time period, diversification meant 5 different internet stocks. And so once again, we live and die by that, situation. But at the end of the day, it's about proper planning, and it's about, making sure that, you have your ducks in a row. Now, the next slide, it really talks about, what we insure in our life. And if you think about our most valuable assets, we insure. We're in California. We've had an incredible few years of fire season. Yeah. And you couldn't sleep at night knowing you didn't have fire insurance on your house. And so, the odds of your house burning down is less than 1%. Now, we all have, most of us have life insurance if we die too soon, protect the heirs. Car insurance every time we drive on the freeways in Los Angeles. Oh, thank God we have car insurance. And then that last one, most people don't have. They don't have retirement insurance or income insurance.
Brad, talk, on a high level, what insurance is. When I see insurance, when I look at insurance, basically it's spreading risk among a set of people rather than taking that risk all on your own.
Yeah, and we are run by actuaries and accountants and people that know numbers, and it's spreading out the risk over many versus one. And so, with AIG, we spread out the risk. We have life insurance, and we cover people if they die too soon, and then we have the annuity business covering people if they live too long. So it's about making sure that the risk is spread out, and there's always a degree of risk, but how can you reduce that risk over, over groups versus an individual.
Now, there is a cost associated to that. It's effectively an administrative cost. But when you look at the cost and you look at the overall ability to sleep a full night without waking up in the middle of the night in a panic to check the Tokyo market or whatever, I think there's something to that. But it's an individual decision, right? Yeah.
It is. And the question is, well, what do I insure? This concept of insuring retirement or having this covering, offering guarantees or insurance. And so the next slide really hones in on what is it that I should insure? And the question is, well, what do you need in retirement? And there's needs and wants always come second to what you need to keep the lights on and pay the bills. But think of it this way, this is the hierarchy of what you should be doing. A lot of people talk about, well, I want to leave my kids and grandkids all this amount of wealth, but you got to walk before you run. You got to make sure that you have your house in order. And this is one way to think about it. This is to make sure that first and foremost, you're not moving in with the kids because you ran out of money. You want to make sure that that income is going to cover your expenses. And it's a real complicated formula that you should be thinking about. It's really, what do you need minus what you're going to get, and do you have an income gap? I'm being facetious here. It's not a real complicated calculation. It's what do you need minus what you're going to get, and do you have a gap? So the next slide goes into what you're going to get in terms of guaranteed income. And Social Security, pension, annuities, all are in the form of guarantees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brett, I just want to talk a little bit about sequencing. So I'll meet with a client, and client might be 55 years old, has enough money to retire. And they say, I want to retire. I don't want to outlive my money. I want to travel for the next 10 years because I know I'll probably have grandkids after that. I won't want to be doing the foreign travel as much, or whatever it is. But I think it's really important when you retire, when you're thinking about retirement, to figure out what you're going to do and to budget for it. Right? Because you may say, look, I'm going to take 6 trips a year for 7 years. That's 42 trips. I'm going to spend $25,000 per trip or whatever it is. And you kind of figure it out. But then that sort of drives the investment decision-making, because many people will find that they may actually take money out of their IRAs if they're not working in their 60s or not. I don't know. Shannon, they might do that. They might not. They might do a Roth conversion at that time. So this is not a do-it-yourself project. I would say that this is probably the most sophisticated mathematical modeling that's out there. And this is not a do-it-yourself job, a do-it-yourself thing. You need to spend your time thinking about how you want to live the next 40 or 30 or 20 years of your life, and hire the professionals to figure out the numbers and how to invest.
Because every decision that you make in terms of where that income comes from has a ripple of consequences. I mean, even just looking at the slide that we're looking at now, guaranteed source of income may seem simple, but when do you take Social Security? That's an entirely different question in and of itself. In your example, Jim, you retire at 55, you could take Social Security as early as 62, but does that make sense for you? Does it make sense to defer it to 70 to get an even larger benefit? And those are only decisions that can be made in the context of the holistic picture.
So we have a question, what is an annuity? I'm going to give you the 35,000 foot level. An annuity is a contract with an insurance company. I give the insurance company money, and they promise to give me a certain amount back if certain events happen or at a certain date or whatever it is. So, an annuity company may say, we're going to give you the S&P 500, whatever. They're not necessarily investing that money in the S&P 500. They're just paying you as it relates to an index, as it relates to really a third party number. So fundamentally, an annuity is a contract, okay? It's you're giving money to an insurance company, and insurance companies go through reinsurance, and the insurance companies even spread risk among themselves. So that's what happens in the background. And then would you say rental income is non-guaranteed? I would say rental income is as strong as a couple of things. Number one, the market, right? So that determines the amount of rent. I would also say that rent income is as strong as the tenant. some of our clients have triple net leases and they might rent to Amazon. I think that's probably a pretty good tenant, right? If I have a piece of dirt and they want to build a distribution center on that, sure. I mean, Amazon's going to pay. But if you're renting to individual people, I would say that rental income is not guaranteed. It's as strong as the person who's, of course, the nice thing about rental income is you can always sell the property, but then that comes with tax issues, right? You can't do a partial sale and on and on and on. So I'll turn it back to you, Shannon and Brad.
Yeah, the other thing I would say on guaranteed sources of income, I already mentioned the Social Security when to take it question, but there's also, you need to be cognizant of potential changes in the future, right? So even those guaranteed sources can change. If one spouse passes away, that could cause a change in the Social Security, may cause a change in the pension. So you need to make sure that you've got a good handle on, exactly what those survivor benefits are as well.
Yeah, we have an upcoming webinar, by the way, on essentially the financial impact of losing a spouse. Like, are you ready? Because what ends up happening, folks, your cost of living really doesn't go down. Your income pretty much always goes down. I mean, as a lawyer, I can't really say an absolute, but it does. Mm-hmm. And your taxes go up because now you're not typically married filing jointly, you're filing singly. So a lot of things happen when you lose a spouse.
Well, perfect. So, just to give us a base case, what we're talking about here, and, the very essence of an annuity, or, guaranteeing some of your income, covering your fixed expenses in retirement. So here's David and Patricia. They're both 65 years old, retiring now and looking to generate predictable income from their accumulated assets, concerned about market volatility and the possibility of outliving. That's the conversation here. So the next slide just kind of walks you through a starting point in terms of, what does it look like for me? And this is what you can start assessing, putting a budget together. What are my expenses? Now, you always have the surprises and the life events that occur, but what is your, typical expenses on a monthly or annual basis? And break it down by, essential and lifestyle. So in this case, back up one more real quick.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
To that first.
I'm going the wrong way. There you go.
Yeah. All
Good
good.
I'm not a tech person. Okay.
That's
I'm
okay.
doing my best.
We made
So
it.
this is broken down by essential expenses. So, there's just certain things that you can budget all day long and you can cut certain things, but you're going to have your mortgage, you're going to have your utilities, you're going to have to eat, go to the grocery store. I talked earlier about inflation, and we talk about, transportation, all the things that if you go out today and live life and you're saying, well, oh my goodness gracious, how did that happen? Life is expensive. And so these are your essential expenses. In this case, $45,000 for them. Their lifestyle expenses that they threw in through memberships and travel was $15,000. So they have total expense of $60,000 a year. That's what they know that's going to be recurring. They're going to have to generate enough income to cover that. So next slide.
And before we move off expenses, Brad, I would just encourage you, do this early and before retirement. This is one of the most important things in terms of evaluating your situation and analysis that I think often gets lost in the shuffle. It can be sometimes difficult to get your arms around exactly where all of the funds are going. And this is such an important step because of all the complexities that Jim mentioned in making forecasts and deciding how we're going to cover expenses. A plan that we develop is only as good as the information that goes into it. So we really need to make sure that this is as accurate as possible. Obviously, we want to avoid that analysis paralysis. This doesn't have to be perfect. We can fine tune it as we go, but this is such an important step. And let me just tell you from the clients that I've worked with and that I've seen, you will not spend less in retirement. I think a lot of people go into it with this mindset like, oh, my expenses are going to come down a little bit. And that is just not what we see. Those first several years of retirement, when you're still young and you're ready to go and you've got lots of energy and you've had all these things that you've been pushing out that you wanted to go see and do, you'll do those things early in retirement. So you end up spending. And then what we see is even on the back end of that, healthcare expenses tend to be really elevated towards the end of retirement. So we don't see this dip off in expenses. So just something to keep in mind as you're doing this evaluation.
Shannon, I'm glad you mentioned that because my dad is a retired lawyer and he retired about 3 years ago. And he told me, he gave me some words of advice. He says, don't wait. He says, I waited too long to retire because I'm just tired.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you're thinking about retiring and you can, and you're thinking about, well, what am I going to do if I don't get up and go to work every day? Really figure that out, because there's a whole world out there of stuff to do. And, you know, God can take you away at any moment, right? Your life, God knows when your life's going to end. You have no idea. I mean, probably. But really think seriously about that, because that's like probably one of the wisest things my dad has ever said to me is don't wait too long, because he figured he waited too long. So.
Well, and that's the human element. You know, we can talk about statistics and numbers all day long, but you hit it right on the head. Absolutely. So that was what they needed. What are you going to get? In this case, they weren't lucky enough to have any pensions. They had Social Security. So 25,000 was what's going to guarantee their income, nothing in addition to that. So the next slide really is the breakdown. So of that, there's a $20,000 essential income gap. So the difference between what they need in essential expenses, what they're going to get from Social Security, there's a $20,000 gap there, but a $35,000 overall income gap when you include the lifestyle expenses, the trips and the donations and all that stuff. And really, this is where you and your spouse can come together and make sure you're on the same page. You know, the question really is, how much of that do you want it insured and protected? And maybe, and from a percentage standpoint, each of you should, you know, maybe answer that question on your own and compare notes. Make sure you're on the same page. And I think it goes into what does the plan look like and how are we going to get there and do it together. So next slide will kind of sum up the conclusion. You know, in this case, they wanted more security. They wanted more peace of mind. So they are going to incorporate some more guarantees into the plan, eliminate their essential lifestyle income gap, increase their income reliability ratio, which really means what percentage of your income is covered by guaranteed income. And for some people, it's just Social Security. And Social Security was never meant to be your sole source of retirement income. So people are looking at additional ways to cover the gap. And then feel more confident about their retirement. And that's really what it's about. And working with you guys and really developing a plan, being accountable to that plan. And that vision should, you know, that's what we're all here for. That vision of retirement should be fulfilled. That's what you work so hard for. And some people call it the longest vacation of your life. The longest vacation, we spend more time on our, you know, 1 week trip to Mexico versus this 30-year vacation. And we should be spending a lot more time on it, making sure we got a plan to account for that. And the next slide is really just a summary. Incorporating, you know, in this case, whether it's variable annuities, index annuities, fixed annuities, and knowing what those are, how they work, and how they can maybe benefit you for some of your money. So
it's almost like a thermostat in terms of the risk that you want to take, right? So a fixed annuity is going to have the lowest rate of return, and then these other two will have a higher rate of return potentially, or not, right? It just depends. But the more risk you are willing to take, the more potential reward. And again, when you give money to an insurance company, they may say we're going to pay you based on a stock market index, but they're not necessarily involved in investing that money in the stock market. Where does the money go, Brad?
Generally, the general accounts of the insurance company, and they're investing the money and in turn providing these protections and products available. But they're doing all that, you know, as a company versus you having to do that on your own, buying futures and, on your own. You're effectively buying a product so you can have the ability to get that amount of protection.
There are several different types of annuities like we're seeing here. And without, kind of making this Annuities 101, because we've already done that webinar and kind of talked about exactly what they are and how they function. From a very high level, I think this is really about thinking about what you want the annuity to do for you. We've talked a lot about creating income, and typically what we're seeing when we're looking for income is we're looking at variable annuities, perhaps an indexed annuity. Usually a fixed annuity is going to be more of a, for that person that wants absolutely no risk and maybe, a legacy for for the next generation as well. But I think really being strategic about the type of annuity and also the type of funds that we would use to buy that annuity. Again, not for every person, not for every portfolio, not for the entire, portfolio as well, just for a sliver for some people who want that mailbox money, that deposit into their bank every month that they know they're going to get. This can be a wonderful solution. But when it comes to deciding, how to fund that annuity, we often talk about annuities for two different purposes: income, which we focused a lot on today, but also tax deferral. So an annuity is one of the only places that you can get outside of a retirement vehicle. So a 401k, a 403b, a 457, an IRA. An annuity is one of the only places that you can get tax deferral. So oftentimes we're using an annuity for that benefit. But what we can do is we might want to look at taking funds like IRA funds that already have that tax deferral benefit and utilizing them in an annuity chassis simply to guarantee the income that's coming off of it. So it doesn't change the tax treatment of the income, but just adds that insurance, that guarantee, so that there's a little bit of extra security on your lifestyle.
Yeah. And, some people, I think you can either be in control or you can feel safe. And I think people who want to be in control tend to be like, I'm not a fan of annuities. People who want to feel safe, they really like them. And then there's this spectrum of people in between. So it's really a gut check, what kind of person are you? But also, again, if you are married and you have a spouse, in the vast majority of situations, you're making joint decisions. Okay. So it's a good idea, as Shannon, as you said, to be on the same page. Anita asks, can you add to an existing annuity? And if so, change from a variable to a fixed? And will the percent payout change and or index for payoff? Is that changed? So I think the question is, are these, what can you do with annuities? Can you add to them? Can you switch between products? How does that work?
Yeah, in some cases you can add, not always, but typically what we would be looking at if we're looking at someone with an existing annuity, potentially looking at a different annuity, is what's called a 1035 exchange. So just like with real estate in the 1031 exchange section of the IRS code, you have the ability to move from one investment to another without paying those taxes. And really the first step in doing that would be to have your current annuity analyzed and make sure that you really understand what it is that you own, what you're paying for, what the benefits are, and then look at, what you're trying to accomplish with that pool of money. Maybe there's a better annuity that's available on the market, to achieve those goals. And if there's no, of course, we need to look at surrender penalties or anything like that. But those withstanding, we would be able to exchange it into a better product. And, this is something that we've talked about before, Brad, as I think, annuities may have left a bad taste in some people's mouths over the years. Could you just talk a little bit about, how you've seen the environment evolve around annuities and what's available, what's out there?
Yeah, and there's really, when it comes to annuities, the annuities that we represent are always through licensed individuals. And when I mean licensed, insurance as well as securities license. So there's a great deal of scrutiny and compliance that goes into every case. And that's always to make sure it's in the best interest of the client, to make sure there are so many checks and balances that go, to make sure it's for the right percentage of their overall liquid net worth, to make sure they're at the right age, to determine if they need the income. A lot of the variable annuities that were sold early on, to your point, Shannon, was for tax deferral. And so a lot of those accounts were non-qualified accounts. They've already been taxed. And then all earnings were deferred until they took the money out. And then over the years, with the invention of these types of guarantees and these benefits, we saw more on the qualified side. So you're not getting any additional tax deferral, but you're buying these products for the guarantees. And so, that's what it's an individual situation. The question was, how would that, if moving annuities, how would that impact the income, or how? Well, every annuity is going to be different. And so it depends. You might have a good one, or maybe your plans have changed and it just hasn't, adapted with all your changes in your life. So with any of those, they should be reviewed.
You touch on two really important points. Number one, sometimes the annuity that you have, switching does not make sense and is not in your best interest. Secondly, Brad, you touched on licensing. And so from what consumers need to know is that there are two types of annuities. And if a person only has a state issued insurance license, and all insurance licenses are issued by the state, they can sell a much smaller subset of annuities. So there may be something better out there. In order to be securities licensed, in order to sell a different type of annuity, or in order to sell all annuities, you need to be both insurance licensed and securities licensed, which is a federal and state, but primarily a federal licensing requirement. So that's very important. So if you're looking at an annuity, make sure you go to someone who has the ability to sell both types of annuities, right? Kelly asks a really good question. Are there credible resources for the consumer to find strong insurance companies? And they want to make sure that the insurance company is financially sound. Kelly, I'm really glad you answered that question, because I have had instances where clients go with kind of random small insurance companies in kind of random small estates, and they've had suboptimal outcomes. Let me put it that way. So Brad, maybe you can talk about how would a consumer find out about whether this insurance company is sound or not? Is there a ratings agency? How do you do that?
Yeah, so I think that's a good starting point to know what with the various rating companies view those companies. There's also the Alliance for Lifetime Income, which is, you might now see commercials, and they have a website, Alliance for Lifetime Income, but always start with the ratings, and just really be able to kick the tires. And when you're talking to Shannon and just make sure there's hundreds and hundreds of companies, and really the key is to make sure you don't make a really bad decision and then find out you're with a company that you don't want to be with, and then there's a surrender period that you can't get out of it. So do all the research up front. Like anything, there's many options. There's some good ones and there's some bad ones. So all the research you do on the front end is going to really help you avoid really bad decisions along the way.
The thing I would add to that is, to Jim's point about there's different types of annuities, and different licenses allow you to sell those different types of annuities or offer those different types of annuities. There's an additional layer of that sometimes you'll be working with an advisor who perhaps is securities licensed and insurance licensed, but they may work for a company that limits the options. To Brad's point, having access to really look at everything that's available out there and make the best choice. It's really important that you're working with someone who has access to the entire universe that's available out there. Here at Ascent Wealth Management, we're all certified financial planners, and we're independent. So we're not beholden to any, one company. We can look at every company. So again, if you're taking in your current statement to be evaluated by someone, we're happy to do that here in our office. We can look at everything that's available in the market, not just that limited section.
Janet asks, how is an annuity used to defer taxes on retirement plans? Well, Janet, it's not. It's essentially a tax deferred zone. So if you were in an annuity or not, or went from one annuity to another, as long as that happens inside of the IRA account, there's no tax consequence. That's different than if it's outside of an IRA. So if that's in your own name, and you kind of cash one annuity out and buy another one, that has a big tax consequence. Okay. So that's something, it's not a deferral of the RMD, because that's federal law. You got to take your money out if you're a certain age, but by December 31. Janet also asks, is there a way to take RMD distributions into an annuity tax-free? So can you take your RMD and put it into an annuity? No. The only answer, I guess, would be if it was a Roth IRA. That would be the only answer.
Well, you couldn't convert your RMD. You could do a Roth conversion early to lower your RMD and get some of that money out of there. But unfortunately, even if it's inside an annuity, you still have to take that required minimum distribution out.
Yeah, we have a lot of content on our YouTube page about retirement accounts, IRAs, minimum distributions. On a high level, if you have a Roth IRA, there is no RMD while you're living. Your kids have minimum distributions when they inherit it, but not while you're living. So Terry asks, what happens typically to the annuity when the first spouse dies and then the second spouse?
It would depend on the ownership of the annuity. Sometimes annuities are on two joint lives, maybe a husband and a wife, or sometimes an annuity could be on only one person. So it would depend on, each individual contract. If it's on two lives, it may continue paying after that first spouse dies. Sometimes the benefit goes down after the first spouse dies. So you just really want to make sure, again, that's another example. You want to make sure you know exactly what you own.
And going back to budgeting and how much will I need in retirement? If you're married, you also have to think about what happens if your spouse dies and when, right? And if the spouse has an early death, how does that affect your retirement?
Mhm.
So, these are all things that you don't necessarily want to think about all the time, but they're very important. Anonymous asks, are annuities now inheritable? If I pass away, will my spouse get the full annuity, or is it reduced or forfeited?
You can. So when you purchase an annuity, you designate a beneficiary, and that person then inherits the annuity, if something were to happen to you. There's actually another webinar that we did with Jim where we talked specifically about this issue of inheriting IRAs, annuities. The tax consequences for your beneficiaries can be pretty unattractive in some instances. Oftentimes an annuity company may say, hey, you need to take all of this money out right now in a lump sum, or you might be able to stretch it out over 5 years. There's some other solutions that are out there that we can get your beneficiaries the benefit of stretching out over a lifetime potentially and taking those gains out of the contract that way. So again, it's an individual situation based on how the contract was written, what type of beneficiary it is, but you do have the ability to pass it on.
Mason asks, does age play a factor in which retirement account should you grow? As an example, if I have a 401k and an IRA and I'm in my 30s, which one should I go for?
When you're in your 30s, you want to be maxing out your 401k because oftentimes there is an employer match that's associated as well. So if you are to, not contribute everything that you can to that 401k, you could potentially be leaving essentially free money on the table when you're not getting that employer match. If you are covered by a 401k, oftentimes you lose the ability to contribute to an IRA as well. It's subject to certain income thresholds. So you want to make sure you talk to an advisor about that as well. But when you're young, you may also want to consider, again, depending on your income limits, or if your 401k offers a Roth option as well, that might be something to consider. But again, these questions really depend on exactly what's available to you in your individual situation. So talk to your advisor.
Anonymous asks, do annuities offer any protection against lawsuits or potential creditors? I don't think so. Just annuities, and there's no asset protection annuity. We probably would have heard of that by now. Anonymous asks, I'm 56 years old. When should I start converting my traditional IRA and 401k to a Roth IRA if it's beneficial? It's a good question.
It completely depends on what your income is. So when you start converting from a 401k or an IRA, anything that comes out will be fully taxable. So as Jim mentioned early on in this presentation, it will just be added onto your taxable income. So if right now you're making a certain amount of salaried income, for example, anything that you convert will be added on top of that. We'd want to evaluate exactly where you're at in the tax brackets and see where we can kind of max out a tax bracket, how much we could convert. So again, it depends on what your situation is.
Yeah, and the term for that is tax bracket arbitrage. So oftentimes you'll take out a distribution until you hit the next, you come up against the next tax bracket. So that we see that quite a bit, but it's really hard to say in a vacuum when you should start doing it. And Shannon, you're spot on with that. Anonymous asks, if buying annuities with money outside of an IRA or 401k, are they still subject to an RMD? So stated another way, if I buy a non-qualified annuity, if I just take $1 million in cash in my bank account that's in my name and put that into annuity, do I have an RMD at 72?
You don't have an RMD, but the thing you would need to be cognizant of is because of that tax deferral, when money does start coming out, there will be tax consequences. But you could put it in there, let it grow, and give it to your beneficiaries, but you're essentially giving your beneficiaries a big tax bill along with that growth as well. So you want to be strategic about that. Again, there's some solutions where we can help give those beneficiaries a little bit more of a favorable tax treatment, better control over when they realize those taxes on an inherited annuity. But no RMD.
Richard asks, what are the pitfalls of an index annuity?
I'll let Brad take that one.
Yeah, I mean, with index annuities, you have surrender charges. You have to make sure that it's a long-term investment. And as we mentioned earlier, with index annuities, you might see being able to invest in Russell and S&P, and people see, oh, the S&P is up 30%. I should also earn 30%. No, with index annuities, there's caps, there's participation rates, and really index annuities are a form of a fixed annuity. It's really a fixed index annuity. And so you should really temper your expectations. Really, index annuities are not so much to be able to hit a home run in the market, but it's more of a protection of principal, making sure I don't lose. So make sure that your risk or appetite for risk aligns with what that product can offer you. So making sure that there's, you can call it pitfall, or you can just understand what it's meant to do. What's the objective with this type of strategy? And there's many different kinds of index annuities, but that's kind of for starters.
Terry asks, does an annuity does not get a step up in basis at death, correct? It does not. That is correct. And any gain in an annuity is taxable as income, right? It's not capital gain. So what's the difference between indexed annuity versus indexed universal life products? Good question.
So one is there's an annuity product that could be designed to give you income. And then there's the universal life that is it's actually insuring your life.
Yeah, so one is a life insurance product that is designed to pay a death benefit. Now there might be an ability to take a withdrawal during your lifetime or take a loan, but that an annuity, so this is like high level stuff, right? An annuity is all about giving you fundamentally a stream of income during your life. Life insurance pays a death benefit when you're dead. And in my book, Savvy Estate Planning, at the very beginning, I remind everyone, you don't take it with you, right? When you leave this earth, your stuff stays behind. So life insurance is the stuff that stays behind after you die. The annuity is the stuff you consume while you're alive, okay? So go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube page. If you subscribe to our YouTube page, this good stuff pops up into your YouTube feed. And if you'd like to contact us, you can reach us at CunninghamLegal.com. You can also reach us by telephone at 530-269-1515, or Ascent Wealth Management. You can reach out to Shannon at myascentwealth.com or go to myascentwealth.com. And I want to thank you very much, Shannon and Brad. This has been very informative. We've had a lot of great questions and a lot of great comments that I didn't even read. But I want to thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.